My name's Kurt Rapp. I'm the moderator of this event, the Secrets of Pool Design and Installation, and I've really got a great honor to have been able to invite a couple of real rock stars in the pool design and construction industry that I have to get through the disclaimer slides as far as the AIA and CES provider statements, and then we'll get to the presentation. So first introduction is Randy Angel.
You can make me go first?
Yeah, you're going first. I thought you knew that. So I'll let him tell you a little bit about himself and his background. I really don't need to go into that, but he is one of the most accomplished pool design exterior designers in our industry, and I'm fortunate to be in a member called Tributary Revelation with him. And Randy Angel Design, acronym is RAD, RAD Designs.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Thank you, I appreciate it, and appreciate you guys coming out to listen to us talk this morning.
You want me to move the slides, or you want?
What do I do?
Just the green,
Okay.
then the red is back.
Just a little bit of background on me to help. It kind of shows how I became what I'm doing now, and kind of what I'm going to talk about this morning. I've always had a passion for design, and going back as early as 3rd and 4th grade, I was, any of you that are old enough to remember what a newspaper is, I love the Sunday newspaper because every Sunday in the real estate section, there would be a home of the week that would have the floor plan and front elevation of the house. I would clip that thing out and fix everything that I saw wrong with it. So, at 8, 9 years old, I took those plans, I'd bring them over to my drafting table, scale them up to 1/8 scale, and then I'd fix all the things I thought were wrong. And so that's just kind of been my mentality my whole life. And then you'll see how that has kind of worked its way into what we're going to be talking about a little bit this morning. I went on, at the age of 15, we moved down to Plano, Texas, which at the time was the fastest growing city in the country. Houses being built everywhere, and got my first job was working for a custom home builder in Plano. And so all through high school, I was designing houses that were being built by my builder and other builders in the area. And what I started to see was behind my houses, they were building swimming pools that I just thought were trash. They had no design continuity, nothing to do with these houses that I was designing, the materials that I was selecting for the interiors. The pool was just its own thing in the backyard that just made no sense. And being the personality that I am, I just couldn't take that. So nobody asked me to, but I just started designing the pools to go with my houses. And over time, as those pools started to become a reality and become popular, I had the main pool builder who was building those stole me away from the home builder, said, come over, be my in-house designer. And ever since then, which would have been 86, 87, my main focus in design has been for outdoor design. And I've always just followed that same kind of mindset that I never wanted to be comfortable. I always wanted to be pushing the envelope. I wanted to be doing things that were new and different, unexpected, and not just following the trail of all of the other pool designers and pool builders. And so that really kind of leads me to
Let me say one thing, just so everyone understands the format, the secrets. There are a lot of secrets,
yeah.
But I asked them to narrow it down to 5 each, so we can really kind of hone in on that. So, okay.
Yeah, so I've got just laid out a few things here for you this morning that we'll walk through, and these are some secrets that came to mind in the topic specifically of what we're all here for, which is the tile and stonework that we can do in these outdoor environments. So the first thing that I started doing that was very different at the time, and again, this was back in the mid to late 80s, when custom pool design wasn't even really that big of a thing. But I started sourcing my materials outside of those typical pool tile stores and pool source material source places. And it really did, how do I go back? I didn't.
The red button.
Yeah. I didn't want to have just those typical offerings for my clients. I wanted to create that special thing. And so I started building relationships with distributors, with manufacturers in my area that, they had no focus on exterior design at that point. Everything that they were doing was houses and commercial properties and things like that. But I would go in and I started to forge these relationships with different distributors and manufacturers in my area, finding out what is the possibility, what can we do differently, telling them what I was designing and what I was needing and what I was not finding. And over the course of the next 30 years, I've seen a huge difference in the potential and the possibilities of the materials that were available then compared to the vast amount of materials that are available for us to use in these outdoor environments now. So that's one of my first things that came to mind is don't feel like you have to really just stick with those pool material sources that every pool builder uses. So then as you're going through that process and you are sourcing materials outside the norm, we want to make sure that we're picking appropriate materials for their applications. The first thing that I want to look at here, I love to look at lessons learned, and this project is one of those milestone projects for me. When I showed up to photograph this, I was horrified by the look of the stonework on this. I hadn't seen it since we finished the pool, and I went back and saw how we had used this very porous limestone as the veneer on these walls, and we used it and selected it because it was being used all over the property. And when I saw how much that was absorbing the water from not only the water feature, but just from being in close contact with the pool water itself, it just horrified me. Quick side note, my photographer said, I can clean that up. I can Photoshop that out, and no one will ever know. And just one of my little side secrets for you, throughout my career, I've always told my photographers, I don't want these kind of things edited out. The people need to see the reality. Nothing is perfect in this world. So when it comes to Photoshop on my projects, I'll have them take out power lines. I'll have them clean up things that have nothing to do with the pool itself, but may distract the eye in the photo. But when it comes to details like this, that's what it is. And I wanted to show the reality, and I wanted to be able to use this as a little life lesson with future clients on things that we're trying to avoid in our material selections. And so moving forward from that point, I really stopped using that kind of limestone anywhere around the pool if I could at all avoid it. Thanks to all of the advancements in technology and what our suppliers and manufacturers are creating for us, now I have a ton of options for walls like this where we can do the large format, and they just keep getting bigger and bigger, which is really fun. The large format porcelains. Stood next to one yesterday that was 10 feet tall, and that makes me really happy because our options and the opportunities for doing new and creative things just keep getting bigger and bigger. But these are just some examples, and when you look at that picture on the lower right, that's a great example of how one of my relationships with a distributor in my area, she always comes to me with the new things, always wants me to know what's on the horizon and get me the latest and greatest so that I can start incorporating them into design work. And I had these raised walls, and you can just barely see it below that coping cap. There's a shear descent waterfall. And so I was trying to find something that I could use on that wall. I wanted a nice texture, but I didn't want to use something that was porous and that was going to, go back to the issue that we saw in that first photo. And so she had just started repping this particular material, which is a porcelain ledge stone. And so it was this perfect solution for that issue. And here again is just that, going back to that project, this was one of the first ones that we, got to use that really large format porcelain tile on the raised wall. And we did the combination of porcelain and glass for the water feature wall. And then I also wanted to touch on the, porcelain versus ceramic. We do have to be careful in any outdoor application on where you're using the ceramic tile, because it's really not going to hold up in direct relation to the swimming pool. I'll use some ceramic tile in a more protected area on an outdoor living environment, but anytime we're getting right in there with the pool and the pool water, definitely want to go with the porcelain tile rather than the ceramic. And this is just another example of using that large format porcelain tile on that water feature wall. And then we did the combination of that same porcelain on the raised spa with the glass tile. Here I just wanted to kind of give a little perspective of, the vastness of the options that we have available to us now, and how you can really create these completely different looks using the porcelain materials that are available to us. We've got the long slab porcelain wood tile on that one water feature wall that's surrounded with the large format porcelain. The right upper photo, we use the porcelain pavers for that decking and coping, and had a custom turned down mitered joint for the coping to give it a really nice thick look to that. That was one of those areas where I wanted it to look like that thick stone, but I didn't want to use a porous stone. And then that bottom photo is actually a stone panel behind that water feature, but it's a really dense hard stone that's not going to absorb that water and have those same issues. Glass tile, I'm going to let Jimmy really get into this, but I did want to just include the basics of this, which I rely on that ANSI A137.2 as kind of the go-to resource as far as what is truly rated for pool use. You want to make sure when you're using the glass tile, going back to the whole pool store things, just because they have glass tile at a pool tile store, it doesn't mean that it was truly rated for swimming pool use. So you do have to do some research and be careful. Always want to go with a face-mounted tile as opposed to that mesh back shown in the photo. And I'll let Jimmy talk more on the details of that. And then I do work with several manufacturers that if their standard is to do that mesh back, they will do a custom order with face-mounted tile for you. The next thing I wanted to touch on is selecting the appropriate decking materials. And again, here we've had such a great improvement in what is available to us. I'm going to start here with lessons learned again. I know that travertine can be a very popular material around swimming pools. I don't use it, and I fight any client that tries to use it. I think it's way too slippery. So we really want to make sure that the material we're using around the pool is something that has a good slip rating, excuse me, a non-slip rating to it, so that we don't have an issue around the pools. This project is one of the first ones where I got to do something that I had been wanting to do for years and years, but the technology and the materials finally caught up with my vision, and I was able to do it. This entire pool is done out of porcelain pavers. So everything from the coping to the decking to even the interior of the pool is done in the same porcelain paver. And it created a really cool, clean, modern look. I'm sorry?
How do you do the lounger?
The loungers are, they're set in place. They're a ledge lounger there. And then we've also got some great concrete pavers that are available to us now. One thing I wanted to touch on here, this entire project is done with concrete pavers. And you can do them as a mortar set on a concrete subdeck, or you can do the sand set on a compacted base. Third option that I've been using with some of my clients that want the stability of having that concrete subdeck is that we actually pour a concrete subdeck, but then we sand set the pavers on top of that. And that way we get away from, in Texas, we have a lot of movement in our soil, so we get a lot of cracking in the decks. I have clients that, they will not put up with cracks. They want to do anything they can to avoid that. And so this was a solution that I'd come up with for some of those clients where the pavers are sand set onto that concrete so that they're free floating and we don't have to worry about the cracking in the decks. And these are just some examples of, this is actually showing a few applications where I used ceramic tile in some areas that were away from the pool. That top left photo is a ceramic tile that we used on a landscape wall in the front yard. And then the other photos are the backyard of that same project. The tile in that bar photo on that bottom right, that's another ceramic tile that we were able to use there because it's a much more protected spot. The fourth thing I wanted to talk about was allowing the materials to really guide your design process. I really like to focus on utilizing the materials and the format of those materials to guide the design so that we don't have these areas with awkward little sliver cuts and things like that. Everything gets that, it's a much more defined and created look when you allow the tile to really run the design for you. And so you'll see in that top left photo, this is another product that to me was really exciting. And Donna, one of my main tile sources, she had all these beautiful cement, encaustic tiles, but I could never use them around the pool. Well, now we've got a lot of options for porcelains that have that encaustic tile look. And so this was an example where I got to bring that into a pool. And then I used the pattern of that tile to set the height of the wall so that we don't have little slivers for the height, the width of the wall, and then also for the placement of those scuppers. They're, set into the actual design of the tile. And on that large feature wall, again, there, just allowing the tile size to dictate the height of that wall, the width of the columns at each side, the height of that insert with the wood panels, allowing those materials to really guide your design work. Here again, using the size of the pavers to create, on this one, it was not only creating those stepper pads, but the overall size of the pool itself was made to follow those same lines so that everything lines up, everything remains super clean. Same ideas here where your raised wall, I wanted it to look like it was big blocks of stone running that raised wall, and so I allowed the tile to dictate our sizes there. The last thing I wanted to touch on quickly is, becoming your client's advocate. One of the reasons I started my company is I didn't want to be the advocate for the pool builder anymore. I really wanted to work for my clients, and I wanted to create these designs in these backyards for them. And a part of that process is then becoming their advocate when it comes to the builder and other people involved in the project. If the builder is not accustomed to doing things a little bit different and going, pushing the envelope a little bit, you may have to step in and, play that advocate for your client to really fight for doing things the proper way, and then, using maybe materials that the builder's not accustomed to using and helping educate the builder and work with them. For me, it's all about teamwork. It's creating a group of individuals that are bringing the project to reality, and I like to try to insulate the client a little bit from any battles that may occur in that process for my vision to come to reality. So that's kind of it for what I had.
So next up,
Any questions for Randy?
well, if we can save
We're
it
gonna-
until last, that would be really good.
Good.
This guy right here has no idea what's coming.
I don't.
So I wanted to do something a little unique to introduce him. Unfortunately, I don't have the notes in the PowerPoint that I thought I had. But
So I'm looking down here at a screen. It's the same that's up here. So if you see
Yeah.
me looking down here, I'm just trying to see what he's talking about.
so this guy has a very unique connection to the two most world-known Freds ever.
Oh, boy.
So you've got Fred Flintstone and Fred
I
Astaire.
did not know you were going to do this.
His grandfather, Alan Reed, was the voice of Fred Flintstone. Very unique kind of a artistic background here.
Thank you so much.
His
for doing
uncle Tito, as he calls him, Hermes,
Tio, yeah.
Hermes Pond,
Our Uncle
was the
Tio.
choreographer to Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, probably one of the most accomplished choreographers ever in the world.
Yeah.
This is a picture of him dancing with Lucille Ball.
Wow.
So again, I don't have my notes, but he's got quite a background in the arts. And you know, he's traveled the country in the 70s through the 90s playing guitar all over the world. But his ultimate gig started when he
ultimate
was
gig.
12, and I'll let him talk from this point forward.
Yeah,
when he
so-
started working for a tile contractor.
That is when I started. I started when I was about 12 years old working for a tile contractor that lived across the street from us. I was a helper. I hauled mud, hauled tools up and down stairways for, all these big burly tile setter guys. And just eventually, it just kind of naturally just grew from there. So eventually I ended up taking on jobs of my own, small kitchen jobs, little kitchen projects, or patios or bathrooms or whatever they were at the time. And I really did all of my learning on site with guys that were much bigger and older than me and more knowledgeable than me. And I really got everything I know from being on site and then developing myself and coming up with solutions to make things just a little bit better.
So for the old timers in the audience, one sort of parallel I want to draw, having a Jimmy Reed pool is sort of the equivalent to having, a Roman tub done by Herman Schock. So those of you may know that name. Obviously, I've been around long enough to know that. But it's quite an honor to be able to have him actually doing your project. So it's along those lines. Just wanted to make
thank
that
you.
point.
Okay, my 5 secrets. First of all, I'm not big on secrets, or at least keeping secrets. I like to make myself available and to share whatever I can and whatever I have with anybody who will listen, or at least who will ask. So just so anybody knows, I'm always available. I don't have really any secrets, but some of the things that, let's see, Kurt put advanced work material selection process.
We're going to go through the slides pretty quickly because
Okay.
of the amount to get there.
Okay, I'll just follow you then.
Yeah.
So this is a book, a Bazaza book. So often I'll bring these type of books to job sites, to client meetings, and we'll choose a few selections of colors and possibly a few blends of some of the colors. I'll generally put together a few mock-ups. I will mount and grout them and put lead lines on them, and so we can actually put them in the customer's pool or a neighbor's pool, so we can actually see what these panels look like in the water. I know what they're going to look like, but a lot of the times the client has no idea that there is a difference from this piece of 6x6 grouted tile, that there is a major difference once it's underwater. These are all mock-ups that we've done for different projects to submerge. Yeah.
That shows a lead line product underwater.
Yeah, you can see the fluorescent lead line. That's just a string line from a construction string. So we'll drill a hole through it and tie a knot in it and be able to walk it around the pool also, so you can see with different depths of water and different light refractions off of the surface. It's pretty interesting to do. Same thing. So site visits. I like to get on site. I like to be involved with projects as early as possible. Sometimes I'll notice things in the concrete that have been overlooked, and I like to, it also gets me involved with the project and familiar with the project and familiar with the people that are building, designing, and or even the homeowner clients themselves. And it just kind of, it makes the entire process go smoother. It gives us all a better opportunity to get to know each other earlier on and really just be able to create something together. And I think it just helps the whole process. The earlier we're all involved, the better.
Before it's dug.
That is before it's dug. So I was on site at this particular project before it was dug. I was able to advise on what I thought the best type of construction on that particular pool would be, meaning a square transition and not doing a super deep end on that pool for the tile selection that we did. So it was all square transition on that pool. We did radius steps and benches, but the floor to wall transitions were square. And that was also I think a 4.5 foot deep pool throughout. And that was something that was decided on in the design process before the pool was even completed design-wise. So we always, on our projects, we always have some type of protection. This is a nice tent, and the tents are usually, for our projects, the tents are usually provided by either the contractor, pool contractor, or the general contractor, or the homeowner themselves, depending on what size of the project is. But we always need protection on our sites from sun, heat, cold, rain, snow, whatever it may be. Also, the surface needs protection, but the material itself needs protection as well. And also the guys need protection. So having my guys be comfortable is beneficial to the job because they're going to do a lot better. They're going to progress a lot quicker and do a lot better work. And you got to keep everything protected. This is another big project in Kansas City where the contractor, he built the tent himself, and he brought big refrigeration units in. So that was just a stud walls that he built, 2x4, and then covered it with I think it was some type of visqueen. There are different materials also that are better for protection. Like that particular material wasn't that good for us because it conducted a lot of heat, the visqueen did. So the best material we found is like the party tent material. It's a thick white vinyl that they use on the tents. And that will reflect and keep the heat out as well. Like that. And you can see these big water containers. Those are full of water, and they're like 50-gallon drums, I believe. And so one of the reasons I don't want to provide the tent is, number one, we're not qualified or insured or experienced in building the tent. And number two, I don't want the liability of that. So the general contractor, I'm not insured to do that. So the general or pool contractor will have clauses in their insurance where they're able to provide protection for their subcontractors.
Even the HVAC systems are involved.
Yeah. This is more tenting on a project, and that was blue tarps that the blue tarps didn't work so well. So the secret here is don't use blue and don't use visqueen. And that's another extreme job site condition. So we will work, and a lot of people that are working all over the country, the pool builders and pool guys on job sites will have different elements to deal with. So we'll go from 120 degrees in the desert to like that particular job, I think was in Idaho, and that was, you can see how cold it is there. So, preparing the vessel. We need to have a super clean vessel. So we will always pressure wash, and usually we like to apply we like to use Acuron CPSP. for our waterproof, our initial waterproofing system. So that's most people know it's a penetrating type of a concrete curing and sealing agent. So we'll start with that in our prep, but most of the preparation, the importance of the preparation is laying out of the material. So it's important that you know what material, we know what material we're using, and because we need to prepare the shell for that particular material, not just skimming and floating at random dimensions and measurements. So each step really needs to be thought out. And here we're getting elevations for, this was a perimeter, not a perimeter, but it was a flying pool. We call them flying pools. It was over a hillside and it was spill on two of the leading edges. So I think we were taking a benchmark from somewhere and then transferring it around to the outer sides. Yeah, so every step, every day we'll do something. I'll be checking on my guys and checking measurements and giving them benchmarks to work off of. And there's a lot of mathematics involved. I'm no mathematician, but at least I can read a tape measure. It's, I'll be checking measurements continuously throughout our installation process. This is an Infinity spillover detail that the concrete builder didn't quite pour it right. The design was to have this big, beautiful, rolled edge on it, and he built it more of almost a sharp infinity point. So we had to float that out and make templates per the actual design and float it out to that. Where'd you get all these pictures?
From the last one we did.
Okay.
This is the scaled down version, believe it or not.
Yeah. So there you can see the template there, and that was a lot of work. That was a lot of extra work that, that pool was not built to plan. So in cases like that, we bid it to plan, and then we get on site, and things like that, if they're elaborate like that, elaborate change order, there has to be money discussed in those type of change orders also. This is something I think the pool builder determined that we needed to extend the treads on these stairs to, oh no, I remember this. This was for a specific porcelain tile. There was a decorative tile. It wasn't a small mosaic material, so it was pretty critical that we had super wide treads on this material, on these steps, to get the full layout of the material. There were several pieces of design that made the entire panel, so we had to extend those treads. Just helping the guys there. We're scratch coating there, getting ready for a brown coat. So I mentioned on another picture of a pool that we did square transitions on all the wall to floor transitions, and here we did the same there, except on the tread and lounge to the stair riser, we radius these details. For me, it makes a real nice, smooth transition of the material, and it feels good, it's comfortable, it looks good, and it's really simple to do. I was just talking to somebody, called me from, I think, Kentucky yesterday, and was asking about that specific detail. He said he searched it all over. He was going to material yards, to Home Depot, looking for he bought like a half a dozen trowels that he thought were meant to do something like this, and he said none of them worked, and he finally called, asked me how we do it, and I said, we get a piece of landscape irrigation pipe, 6-inch PVC just off the job site, and cut it in quarters, and that's our template. And he just couldn't believe how simple that was. So that's a secret that I don't keep, that I'm happy to share, and that's how simple it is, making those transitions. That's the big radius spill that we had to do. So that was also a curved wall. That was pretty intricate working, trying to get the perfect curve on that. Yeah, you can see in the bottom of the left of that picture how much we had to build up there to get the transition from the flat, shallow floor. It was a flat, level floor to a certain point, and then it was pitching down. I think the way it was built, it was pitched, the whole floor was pitched, and it started pitching down to the slope prematurely. So we floated it up level to whatever point that was, and then made a specific transition down to the slope. And the slope It does roll a bit, but it gets pretty flat all the way down and then goes into a flat, level, deep end area. That's also a square transition pool on the side. No, that's not a square, not a square. But you can see also how tight those coves are. So when we're doing coves like this, also what's important for us is that the cove on the left side is exactly the same cove on the right side, and that far deep end side as well. So everything layout and grid-wise goes together perfectly. So we start at the top of that lounge, went down, made the transition floor, and then up the other wall with 0 cuts. We had full piece up here, no cuts on the bottom, and full piece up here. Same with the front deep end wall. And it's all in the layout. It's all calculated and measured and laid out and thought out from day one, really. And things change along the way, but that's my boy Jack. So my wife Elizabeth is here. Our 19-year-old son, he works for us now. So we're happy about that. So he's applying a waterproofing there. Go back a minute.
Yep.
He's applying, where is it? Yeah, okay, so he's applying a waterproofing onto the front of those risers there. Anyway, go on.
Secondary waterproofing. You've
Yeah.
already done the primary.
Yes, we did the primary. That was the secondary, and so that surface we will install directly onto. And they're applying it there as well. Got to keep the guys happy on the site, so a lot of times they'll set up a full kitchen in the pools, and they have their elaborate lunches. Yeah. Yep. Again, just laying out, taking measurements and giving the guys lines to go off of. So a lot of times I'm asked what's my favorite level to use, or laser level, or transit, and my answer is we use everything that we can, and we are always checking each tool off of another tool. So if we're using a bunch of mineral levels, or spirit levels, like Stabila levels are a popular brand and good product we use, but we'll use a bunch of those, and it's important to turn the levels around because they're going to work, they'll only be level both ways if they're accurate. We use those, and we use transits and lasers against those, and all the leveling tools against each other. So we're sure that everything is accurate. I guess I'm giving some pointers. Yeah, so I have a couple of details that I like to do, and there's no real formula to them. This particular one, I go to the site and I just draw it in place as an example. Sometimes I'll draw it 3 or 4 times and have to wash it off or erase it and start over and just kind of put it together. Sometimes I'll come up with ideas in the middle of the night and have to get to the job site first thing in the morning so I can draw it out somewhere. It makes for nice kind of signature little details, and that's just something I like to put on our projects. The tiling begins. So there's a lot of preparation that goes up to the point where we're actually starting to install the tile. So I always say that most of our work is in the preparation, is in the floating, in the preparation of the shell out to our final sculpted surface that we're actually going to put the tile onto.
If you had to give a percentage, what would that be, amount of time on the project, in just the preparations alone?
Well, it doesn't go from shell, float the entire thing, and then one day we just start installing. But I can say, because there are different stages of the pools and of the project, and we have multiple guys working. So we'll float an area and maybe start installing there before the floor is even floated. So there's always multiple tasks being done at once. But generally, I would say the ratio of preparation until we start installing to the tile installation portion would be maybe 60 to 70%.
Just in the prep?
Just in the prep, yeah. And all those layers that go to the actual installing the tile. Once we start installing tile, if we were to, as an example, if we were to float the entire pool and then start installing everything, that tile installation would fly. And the tile installation portion of the job does fly once we get to it, even if we're doing it in sections. So again, most of the work is up to the installation, and once it starts, the material goes up pretty quickly. It's kind of like doing body work on a car. You know, you can work for months and months on restoring a car with body work and so forth, and then once you're ready to paint, the paint you can do in a day. You know, laying the paint on. So. Yeah, I would say 60 to 70% preparation. This picture, though, go back to that for one more second. So depending on who you ask and depending on who's saying, I think it's between 95 and I say 100% coverage is what's acceptable for submerged applications, meaning the thin set access and contact with the back of the tile. So I always say 100%. There's no reason you can't get 100%, and that's a good example of it. So periodically we'll go through the installation and peel back a few sheets. Periodically meaning every few hours, every day, we'll go and take a couple of sheets off just to check and see how much material we're getting on the back of the mosaics themselves. Mostly we're talking about mosaic tile. Yeah, just cutting in detail. So here's a kind of a pretty intense inspection that we're doing. We were looking at the residue that was being left on the material. We were just kind of experimenting on how to wash the material off, if there was a more efficient way to wash it off, and what we could see if we were doing different processes. So there's no real specific secret to that. We're just experimenting and trying to just come up with a cleaner, more efficient way to get the material off. So what are we looking at here? So the right side there, that's a cover track, and the top of that spill, that was a spa spill into a pool, and it was critical there, and it is critical, the space that you give for the cover between the top of the spa wall or whatever it could be a stair or whatever, but that dimension has to be specific, dictated by the pool cover manufacturer. So that, in this case, it went from the pool cover manufacturer to the pool builder, and he relayed the information to me, and that's how we kind of determine it and give it to the guys. That's just a picture, kind of an example of there's still some floating being done, still some waterproofing being done. There was a lot of tile already installed and being cleaned off, so that's an example of different phases of our installation process that can all be done at the same time. Yeah. So that's a square transition corner, vertical corner down to horizontal coves. So in that scenario there, I like to kind of do one of my little stitched together corners. And that's just, I just start thinking about it at that point, and then I'll draw it and go from there. This is an example of using a one-step installation process where we're using a material, the Starlight grout, epoxy grout material, as our actual installation material as well. So we spread that on the floor, and also back part of the mosaic sheets with the same material embedded on the floor. Then you have in that case you have that was a 10 millimeter glass, so it was super small, little piece of mosaic. So we were able to get a really thorough installation, meaning it was one material throughout not a thin set and a grout applied at different times. It was one body of material installed at once. So it was a really solid, thorough installation. Just shows how critical, obviously spill edges and infinity edges and so forth are critical, that they're perfectly level. Radiuses can be difficult. This is a pretty interesting pool. There was a lot of pattern, obviously, in the glass material. That was a Bezaza Damascus Powell pattern is what they call it. And we used white gold tread markers for this. But the tricky thing is not just that the material, the glass material itself looks so flashy and cool looking, but really when I see this, there was so much that went into all these transitions, from that first step down to the bench, and then the bench down to the second step, and the third and fourth step down to the pool floor. So there's, again, that is pure layout getting 0 cuts. So everything is calculated per the size of the tile and the grid. Other examples of the same type of layout and how intense that is. Handing over my baby. So when I like to fill the pools if I have the chance. We will definitely wash them down. So the pools, once we're finished, depending on the installation system we're using, they always need a cure time. So we'll go back, 2 or 3 weeks, 1 to 3 or 4 weeks, depending again, to fill it. Also depending on when the job needs to be full. Sometimes they don't want it full for quite a while. Anyway, we'll go back and clean it out real nice and polish it up, look for any things that we may have missed in the grouting, do some touch-up, maybe do some sanding of corners, and just smooth everything out and water it down, put the hose in there and fill it up. And by the time it's full like that, when I walk away from one of these projects, I mean, we put a lot, even on smaller projects, we put a lot into them. Emotionally and design-wise, all the design things for me are things that I think about not just 9 to 5, not just during the day. I mean, I'm constantly thinking about our installations, how to make them better, what we've done in the past, what mistakes we've made, how we can learn from our own mistakes. We see other guys' mistakes and like to talk to a lot of other people and other installers and go back and forth. And so, but sorry, I'm getting a little carried away, but I do feel like these projects, they kind of take a part of me. I'm giving a part of myself away when I'm turning these over to the clients. I just love all these projects.
So we've got about 10 minutes left for questions.
Okay.
So
let me just
appreciate
recap by saying, once again, I really don't have any secrets. I'll come up and I am constantly learning and coming up with new ways and techniques, or at least experiments, and I'm always happy to share those. So any questions anybody has at any time, I'm always available.
Jimmy, how do you deal with when you're mudding one of these, how do you deal with the cold joints where you finish one mudding area and it goes on to the next?
You mean in our float, in our brown coat? So we will we'll hit it with thin set with a brush. We'll have like a slurry of thin set, and we'll burn it into the texture of wherever that day's float stopped. The next day we'll burn it in with thin set and continue it.
What about movement joints?
Movement joints, well, that's my secret. That's kind of there are definite regulations on movement joints, and I can't say that I always follow those recommendations and regulations. I think that it's definitely critical to have a movement joint, and what I mean by movement joint is a soft joint, so definitely between coping and any material that's going up to the coping. I always consider these projects a controlled environment, so I don't feel it as necessary as some others may feel it, that our pools have movement joints or expansion joints or soft joints. A lot of times the designers or architects, they'll forbid those, and we have to go by what they say, because they're not going to want to see any type of grid in their overall design. But back to the controlled environment, like this pool is in Natchitoches, Louisiana, and that owner, we and the pool contractor that I worked for were specific in writing and telling and instructing this owner that he has to keep his water heated to 70. He didn't want it below 75 degrees, and he turns it on, and he has a lot of parties. They turn that thing up to like 90 degrees, I think, 92 degrees. But we were instructing him to keep it at nothing below 75 degrees. Therefore, there is no movement based on, as a result of temperature swings. Most of the movements that do happen are a result of temperature swings that I've found.
One other question. How do you deal with latex migration with your thin set?
Well, The last several years, we've gone away from cementitious products that have latex additives, and so we're using mostly epoxy polyurethane hybrid installation systems, which just do not react like that. Yeah. Yep.
What part of the process do you only trust yourself?
I'm sorry?
What part of the process do you only trust yourself to do, John? I see you have workers and stuff. Where are you? Like, hold on, everybody step aside. I'm coming in.
Oh, okay. So for a project that's out of town, like this was, like I say, that was in Louisiana, I will go into this job site every 2 weeks and spend a couple of days there with my guys. Also, my guys are not guys that I hire off the corner or I go to a certain part of the country and get local guys to do jobs for me. All my guys are long-term employees that have been trained since day one by me to do my installations. I don't give them a book and say, learn this, this is how we're doing it. They do exactly my specific installation techniques and using the materials that I want to use, and they do things, they know, they're almost like part of my family, and they know exactly what I want, and they know how to do what I want. So, you know, some people that may not be familiar with the process of our out-of-town projects, that's just what happens. I mean, my guys know exactly what I want. When I get to a job site, usually I'm there, if I'm spending a day there, I'm just kind of talking shit with the guys and getting, you know, saying how you been for the last 2 weeks since last time I saw you. We'll hit on details. We'll you know, walk the job site. They'll have specific questions, but never do I go onto a site and say, oh my God, this is completely wrong. That's not the way I do things. We have to tear it out or anything like that. Yes. It's hard to see, so sorry if I'm missing you.
Do you ever experience failures or any kind of issues with the rate at which pools are being filled or being emptied after the job is finished?
No, not specifically that way because we're pretty thorough in our instructions. And a lot, like I said earlier, a lot of times I'll be filling the pool. So the rate of a pool being filled, it's usually just with a garden hose. So it's not like it's getting, you know, a fire hose and getting 2 or 3 feet an hour. So it's a gradual fill, so the pool kind of settles, I guess, within itself. And then as far as if the pool has to be drained, it's the same thing. I mean, a sump pump it'll take a lot of water out, but it's not at a rate that would create any damage or jeopardize the structure. Mm-hmm. Yes?
Starting with the design side, what's y'all's thought process on maintenance and maintenance throughout?
Well, you mean maintenance once the project's finished? Like water maintenance?
Maintenance of the tile, maintenance of the materials.
During installation?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's like what we were talking about with the tents. So the environment has to be controlled, not just here, like I was saying, that interior, that pool is a controlled environment, but we need to control our work environment. So we'll have a tent, we'll have it either heated or cooled or not, depending on the area and the time of year. But the material, the tile material needs to be at temperature. We can't take something that's been sitting outside in sub-zero weather and bring it right into a project and start installing. So even the glass material, cementitious products, Harold, when I was saying about the material that we're using is we're not using cementitious products that much anymore, but the mortar bed is still cementitious. So that needs to be kept at temperature. Sorry, Harold, back to you. The mortar bed is also protected once we put the waterproofing on it and the polyurethane installation material. I feel that cementitious portion of the project is protected from water. So there's not really any leaching out of that. But back to the protection, yeah, even the installation materials need to be protected as well. So we'll have temperature thermometers in the tents as well to make sure that we're at the range that the manufacturer is suggesting.
And then continuation. Whenever you're creating the designs, what's your thought process for maintenance, 5-10 years down the road?
I think that plays into this whole process of where I was looking for better materials than, what I was finding as far as typical pool tile and whatnot. So it's always, just looking at the types of materials and where they're being used. If it is going to be the waterline tile, my thought always goes to making sure that we're using material that is going to be good for, ongoing maintenance and whatnot. Try to use that. It's one of the reasons I like the larger format. Go to a 6x24 instead of a bunch of little grout lines everywhere. Those are just a maintenance thing that you always have to keep clean. So that's one of the things I love about using the longer tiles for that waterline tile. But it's always that thought process of where the material is going and selecting a material that is going to be as maintenance-free as possible.
So I have a question. Along those lines, how big of a format do you see being used in pools going forward? I mean, we're talking big panels. You mentioned one, 10 foot.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen a couple of projects that are big tiles.
Yeah, and I think there is somewhat of a limitation there because just with stress factors over the length of a body of water, and it's all depending on the environment that it's in and different things like that. But I keep stretching the limit anytime that I can, and I got super excited over that 10-foot panel because I'm designing a fire pit on the side of a pool right now. We're trying to find the right material for it, and I want it to be a slab with no seams or grout joints on it. And so, it's really cool to see all of these new products coming out that are allowing me to really stretch my imagination and things like that.
So we've got a couple minutes more for a few more questions. Woody?
In the design process, I've noticed, at least in these photographs you have today, these are a lot of courtyard effects happening. Are you getting involved with the landscape art? Are you dictating water management coming off the house? These decks obviously hold a lot of water. You've got to get it out of there. Obviously, in certain ordinances, like in our part of the country, now the cities are requiring us to manage the water on site, but we just can't dump it down into the
Right.
into the drain. I mean, are you involved in that part?
That is generally a portion of our part of the process. It certainly plays into, even if it's not something that we end up going into specific detail on structural drawings, it always plays a role in that design process and making sure that we're allowing for that water to travel through the area and get out where it's supposed to go instead of dumping on the neighbors. Most of the cities that we deal with now require some sort of plan. A lot of them now are actually requiring a civil engineer to come in and design those drainage systems.
Anybody else?
Other than leaching, can you just make a list of other reasons that you're moving away from cementitious?
I have found that the newer systems that we're using are being epoxy polyurethane hybrid type materials. They have epoxy bond and almost like silicone flexibility. So for us, one of the main concerns and benefits of that material is the flexibility once it's installed. So we want something that's not going to be so rigid, like a traditional epoxy is super bond-wise super strong, but there's no flexibility. It's too rigid, so any type of movement will cause the material to either fracture or pop or create some kind of damage. So the key for us is that to get as much flexibility as possible. So even in the waterproof membrane, it'll have a certain amount of flexibility in that, coupled with the installation material flexibility. Then that just helps us be more confident in our installation. Yeah. Sorry?
What do you use for waterproofing? You have a primary and secondary.
Yeah, so generally we will spray the raw shell once we clean it with Acuron. Acuron CPSP, the Concrete Pool Shell Protection System, they call it. I can send you a spec sheet on it if you're interested in that. But we'll start with that, and then we'll do our float, our scratch, and brown coat, and then on top of that, we'll put a waterproof membrane on, like I was just talking about, a flexible membrane. And we've been using the Aquamaster, Lidocol Aquamaster, for several years now. And that's the main waterproof membrane. And then when we install on top of that with the flexible material, that also creates a waterproof layer as well in that material itself.
So we've reached the 10:30 mark. The time's up.
One last one.
One last question.
Okay.
Do you use on your waterproofing on change of plane, do you use like a reinforcing fabric?
No, it's not really necessary on our projects. The material that we're using is rated to make those transitions without any type of fabric. Yeah.
Thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
Obviously, that you can come up here and ask some questions of them.
Any questions,
Also in
anytime.
person.
Thank you.